The dust never settled on Ashford 7. David Reeves had learned this truth 3 months into his mining contract. And now, 2 years later, he barely noticed the red particles that coated everything he owned. His boots crunched against the rocky ground as he walked deeper into the newly discovered cave system, his headlamp cutting through the darkness like a knife through butter. The mining company had sent him to survey these caves for mineral deposits. Standard procedure. Boring work. David had done it 100 times before on a dozen different worlds. He checked his scanner and frowned at the readings. Something was interfering with the signal, creating strange patterns he had never seen before. He moved further into the cave, following the anomaly. The tunnel opened into a large chamber and David stopped breathing. Scattered across the floor were pieces of metal that definitely did not belong there. They gleamed even under the dust, covered in symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. This was not human technology. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A wheeze like air escaping from a broken valve. David turned his head slowly, scanning the chamber with his light. There, tucked against the far wall behind a fallen boulder, something moved. David approached carefully. His training screamed at him to report this immediately and leave. Protocol was clear about alien life forms, but curiosity pulled him forward, and perhaps something else too. Loneliness, maybe. This dead planet had a way of making people do strange things. Behind the boulder lay a creature about the size of a house cat. At first David thought it might be dead. Its scales were a dull gray-brown, cracked and peeling in places. Burns covered much of its body, and one of its wings hung at an unnatural angle. But then its chest moved, just slightly, and David knew it was alive. The creature was unlike anything in the colonial database. It had 4 legs, 2 wings, a long tail, and a head that looked almost reptilian, but the scales caught the light in a way that suggested something beneath them, something that flickered like dying embers in a fireplace. David knelt beside the creature. Its eyes opened slowly, revealing pupils that glowed a faint orange. They fixed on him with an intelligence that made his skin prickle. This was not an animal. This was a person, just in a very different form. "Hey there," David whispered, not knowing if it could understand. "You look pretty bad." The creature made a sound, something between a chirp and a growl. Then its eyes closed again, and David feared it might die right there in front of him. He made a decision that would change his life forever. David removed his jacket and carefully wrapped the creature in it. The thing was surprisingly light, almost hollow feeling. He tucked it against his chest and began the long walk back to the colony. Getting past the security checkpoints required creativity and several lies. David told the guards he felt sick and needed to get to his quarters immediately. They barely looked at him, too focused on their card game to care about one more tired miner coming back early. David had never been so grateful for lazy security in his life. His quarters were small and cramped, just a bed, a desk, and a tiny bathroom. David cleared the desk and laid the creature down gently. Under the harsh artificial lights, it looked even worse. The burns were deep, and he could see exposed tissue beneath some of the damaged scales. Without treatment, it would die within hours. David had no medical training, but he had a well-stocked first aid kit and access to the colony's veterinary supplies. He worked through the night, cleaning wounds with antiseptic, applying burn cream to the worst areas, and splinting the broken wing as best he could. The creature never made a sound, even when David knew the treatment must have hurt terribly. As dawn broke over the red desert outside his window, David finally sat back and looked at his work. The creature was still alive, breathing more easily now. He had done everything he could. Now it was up to the creature itself to fight for survival. David named her Ember, because of that faint glow he had seen beneath her scales. He knew keeping her was insane. He could lose his job, face criminal charges, or worse. But as he looked at her small, broken form, he could not imagine doing anything else. She had been left to die alone in a cave on a planet far from home. David understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. Over the next few days, David fell into a routine. He would go to work, perform his duties, and rush back to check on Ember. He fed her water through a dropper at first, then small pieces of protein paste when she was strong enough to eat. Her recovery was remarkable. Within a week, the burns had begun to heal, and her scales started to show their true color underneath the damage. They were not gray at all. They were a deep crimson like rubies held up to firelight, and beneath them that inner glow grew stronger each day. Ember watched David constantly with those intelligent orange eyes. And he found himself talking to her as if she could understand every word. "I had a good life once," he told her one evening while changing her bandages. "Back on Earth, good job, good woman, good future. Then I made some mistakes, said the wrong things to the wrong people, lost everything." He laughed bitterly. "Now I am here mining rocks on a planet nobody cares about. Running away, I guess." Ember made a soft sound and pressed her head against his hand. The gesture was so clearly meant to comfort him that David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "But maybe I was meant to be here," he said quietly. "Maybe I was meant to find you." 3 weeks after the rescue, David came back from work to find Ember standing on his desk. She had been too weak to move much before, but now she stretched her wings experimentally. The broken one had healed crooked, but she could extend it fully without pain. She turned to look at David and made a sound that might have been greeting or perhaps laughter. David smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. "Feeling better, huh?" Ember jumped from the desk and glided clumsily to his shoulder, her claws gripping his shirt for balance. She was still small enough to perch there comfortably. She touched her snout to his cheek, and David felt heat radiating from her scales. He had saved her life, but as the days passed, David began to suspect that Ember was saving his life too, in ways he was only beginning to understand. 18 months had passed since David found Ember in that cave, and life had become complicated in ways he never imagined. The small creature that once fit in his jacket pocket now measured 4 feet from nose to tail tip. She could no longer hide in his quarters, which meant David had to get creative. The solution came in the form of the same cave system where he had found her. David had discovered a deeper chamber far from the survey routes, with a natural chimney that vented to the surface. He brought supplies bit by bit, building a comfortable space for Ember to stay during his work shifts. Blankets, food, water containers, and even some books with pictures. Ember seemed to enjoy looking at the books, tracing the images with one claw as if trying to understand them. Every morning before his shift, David would hike to the cave and spend an hour with Ember. Every evening he would return and stay until dark. His co-workers thought he had taken up geology as a hobby, collecting rock samples in his free time. They teased him about it, but nobody suspected the truth. Ember had changed in more ways than just size. Her scales now shimmered like polished rubies, and the glow beneath them had become a steady pulse of warm light. She could fly properly now despite the crooked wing, soaring around the cave chamber with grace that made David's heart sing. But the most remarkable change was her intelligence. She understood everything David said, not just simple commands, but complex ideas and emotions. When he talked about his day, she listened intently, making sounds that seemed to comment on his stories. When he was sad, she would press against him, sharing her warmth. When he was happy, she would dance around him, wings spread wide in obvious joy. One evening, David brought a portable music player to the cave. He played some of his favorite songs, old Earth classics his mother had loved. Ember became completely still, transfixed by the sound. Then something incredible happened. Her scales began to glow in patterns that matched the rhythm of the music. Waves of light rippled across her body, creating a visual symphony that took David's breath away. "You can do that?" he breathed, watching the light show in amazement. Ember turned to him and created a new pattern, a complex sequence of glowing symbols that flowed across her scales. She repeated it several times as if asking him to pay attention. David grabbed his notebook and began sketching the patterns. Over the next few weeks, he documented hundreds of different light sequences. Ember would create a pattern, then point to an object or perform an action. Slowly, David began to understand. This was language. Ember was teaching him how to communicate with her. The breakthrough came 3 months later. David had been trying to explain the concept of family to Ember, showing her pictures of human parents and children. Ember watched carefully, then created a pattern he had never seen before. It was beautiful, a spiral of golden light that started at her head and flowed down to her tail. She repeated the pattern, then touched David's chest with her snout. Then she created the pattern again and touched her own chest. David understood. Family. She was saying they were family. "Yes," David said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are my family, Ember, the only family I have out here." Ember's eyes glowed brighter and she created another pattern. This one was more complex, multiple colors weaving together. David sketched it frantically, trying to capture every detail. He spent hours that night trying to translate it, using the basic vocabulary they had built together. The message, as best as he could understand it, said something like, "Daughter of great fire. Lost from home, thought to die. You gave life. Your chosen parent, Sparkfather." David sat back stunned. Ember was not just an intelligent creature. She was royalty of some kind, from a civilization advanced enough for space travel, and she considered him her father. The weight of that responsibility hit him hard. He was not just hiding an alien pet. He was raising someone's princess, someone's daughter. Somewhere out in the stars, people might be looking for her. A family might be grieving her loss. "Do you want to go home?" David asked quietly. "If I could find a way, would you want to go back to your people?" Ember looked at him for a long moment, then created a simple pattern. It was one of the first ones she had taught him. It meant no. Then she created another pattern, one that meant here, followed by the pattern for family. Her meaning was clear. Her home was with him. David pulled her close, burying his face in her warm scales. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, we will figure this out together." But keeping Ember hidden was becoming harder every day. Roger Bennett, a senior miner who worked David's shift, had started asking questions. He had seen David hiking toward the caves too many times. He had noticed the extra food David bought from the supply store. He had commented on the strange energy readings sometimes detected in the old cave system. David tried to deflect the attention, but Roger was not stupid. He was the kind of man who liked knowing things, who enjoyed having power over others. If he discovered Ember, he would report it immediately, probably hoping for a reward or promotion. The situation came to a head during a routine mining operation. David was working deep in a newer tunnel when a support beam cracked. He saw it happening and tried to run, but the ceiling came down too fast. Rock and debris buried his left leg, pinning him to the ground. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and terrible. His team worked to free him, but it took hours. By the time they pulled him out, his leg was mangled badly. The colony doctor said he was lucky it had not been worse, but David would need weeks of recovery. They gave him strong pain medication and sent him to his quarters to rest. That night, in a haze of drugs and pain, David did not make it to the cave. He had never missed an evening with Ember before. He fell asleep worrying about her, hoping she would understand. He woke to warmth against his side. David opened his eyes and nearly screamed. Ember was in his quarters, curled next to him on the bed. She had somehow navigated the colony, found his room, and slipped inside without being seen. "You can't be here," David whispered urgently, even as he felt relief at seeing her. "If anyone finds you..." Ember created a pattern that meant hurt and touched his injured leg gently. Then she did something David had never seen before. She opened her mouth and breathed out a stream of warm air that glowed like heated metal. The heat should have burned him, but instead it felt soothing. The pain in his leg decreased immediately. For several minutes, Ember continued to breathe her strange healing warmth onto his injury. When she stopped, David's leg felt better than it had since the accident. The swelling had gone down and he could move his toes without agony. "Thank you," David said, running his hand along her scales. "But you need to go back before someone sees you." Ember created a stubborn pattern, one they had developed together. It roughly meant, "No, this is more important." She settled her head on his chest and closed her eyes. David knew he should make her leave. Every moment she stayed increased the risk of discovery. But he was so tired, and the pain medication was pulling him back toward sleep. He wrapped one arm around her, feeling her steady breathing against him. "Just for tonight," he mumbled. "Then you go back." But tomorrow would bring changes neither of them expected. Roger had seen the energy reading spike near David's quarters that night. And Roger was already making plans. 6 years had transformed everything. Ember was no longer the small creature David could carry in his arms. She was magnificent, measuring 40 feet from her nose to the tip of her tail. Her ruby scales caught the light like precious gems, and the glow beneath them had become a steady radiance that could illuminate the entire cave chamber. When she flew, which she did often now, she looked like a falling star against the red sky of Ashford 7. David had stayed on the mining colony long after his contract ended. He had turned down 3 job offers, 2 promotions, and 1 transfer to a better facility. His coworkers thought he had gone native, fallen in love with the harsh beauty of this desert world. They had no idea that his reason for staying measured 40 feet and spoke in patterns of light. The cave had become a true home. David had furnished it with everything Ember might need and many things she simply enjoyed. Books filled one corner, though Ember could now read them herself. She particularly loved human history and philosophy. David would watch her trace the words with one delicate claw, her eyes following each line with absolute concentration. They had developed their own language over the years, a mixture of Ember's light patterns and simple words. Through this, Ember had told David her story. She was the third daughter of the Empress of Perilous Major, a world circling a distant star. She had been traveling to a protected sanctuary for young royals when her ship was attacked. The enemy had been ruthless and efficient. Everyone aboard died except Ember, who had been blown clear in an escape pod that crashed on Ashford 7. Her people believed she was dead. No one was looking for her anymore. This knowledge sat heavy between them, but Ember always insisted she was happy where she was. David was her spark father, a sacred relationship in Dracorian culture that meant more than blood family. She belonged with him, but keeping a 40-foot dragon hidden was nearly impossible. The colony had expanded significantly over the past 6 years. Survey teams now regularly explored areas that came dangerously close to their cave. And Roger Bennett had never stopped watching David, never stopped suspecting that something strange was going on. The confrontation came on a cool evening. David was hiking back to the cave after his shift when he realized someone was following him. He turned to find Roger standing 20 feet behind him, a smug smile on his weathered face. "Taking your evening walk, David?" Roger asked, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "Just enjoying the scenery," David replied carefully. "Right. The scenery." Roger stepped closer. "Funny thing. I have been tracking the energy readings around those old caves for years now. Very strange patterns. Very consistent times. Almost like something lives there." David's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "The caves have unusual mineral deposits. Creates electromagnetic interference." "That is what I thought too," Roger said. "So I did some research. And you know what? The energy signature does not match any known mineral. But it does match something else. Biological readings. Something big and warm-blooded that gives off a hell of a lot of heat. You are imagining things." "Am I?" Roger pulled out his portable scanner and showed David the screen. "This is from 10 minutes ago. There is a life form in that cave that is not on any colonial registry, and I know it is connected to you because you visit it every single day. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to take me to see whatever you are hiding, or I am going to report this to the colonial authority right now." David felt his world crumbling. He could try to deny everything, but Roger had evidence. He could try to run, but where would he go? And Ember was too big to relocate quickly. They were trapped. "If I show you," David said slowly, "you have to promise not to hurt her." Roger's eyebrows shot up. "Her? This just gets better." He gestured toward the cave. "Lead the way." The walk to the cave felt like a death march. David tried to think of a way out, but his mind was blank with panic. When they reached the entrance, he turned to Roger one last time. "Please understand," David said. "She is not a threat. She is just—" "Move," Roger interrupted, pushing past him into the cave. They walked through the tunnels to the main chamber. Ember was there reading one of her books by the light of her own glow. She looked up when they entered, and her eyes immediately fixed on Roger. Her body tensed, recognizing danger. Roger stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. What in the name of— Ember rose to her full height, wings spreading wide. She positioned herself between David and Roger, a clear gesture of protection. Light patterns flashed across her scales, angry reds and oranges that David recognized as a warning. "It is okay," David said quickly, speaking to both of them. "Ember, this is Roger. He is not going to hurt us." "Roger, this is Ember. She is my friend. My family." "That is a dragon," Roger whispered. "An actual dragon." "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "Hiding an alien life form is a felony. Hiding a potentially dangerous one is—" "She is not dangerous," David said firmly. "She has never hurt anyone. She is intelligent, peaceful, and—" "I do not care what she is," Roger snapped, recovering from his shock. "This is the discovery of a lifetime. The scientific community will pay millions for access to her. The military will want to study her capabilities. And I am the one who found her." Ember growled, a sound that made the cave walls vibrate. David put a hand on her side, trying to calm her. "You are not taking her anywhere," David said. "I do not think you have a choice." Roger pulled out his communicator. "I am calling this in right now." But before he could send the message, the entire cave lit up with brilliant purple light. A sound like thunder filled the air, and David felt his skin prickle with static electricity. Something massive had just entered Ashford 7's atmosphere. Ember's reaction was immediate. She threw her head back and released a beam of concentrated heat straight up through the cave's natural chimney. The light was so bright that David had to shield his eyes. It was a signal, unmistakable and powerful. "What did you do?" David demanded. Ember created a pattern on her scales, and David's heart sank as he read it. "My people. They found me." 3 shapes descended from the sky, visible through the chimney opening. They were dragons like Ember, but larger, their scales shimmering in shades of gold, silver, and deep blue. They landed outside the cave with earth-shaking impacts, and David heard their footsteps approaching through the tunnels. Roger had gone pale. "There are more of them?" The 3 dragons entered the chamber, and David felt like an insect looking up at mountains. They were ancient and powerful, carrying themselves with absolute authority. One of them, the gold-scaled leader, spoke in a voice that resonated through David's bones. The language was incomprehensible to him, but the tone was clear. It demanded answers. Ember responded with her own sounds mixed with light patterns. A conversation was happening, fast and intense. David caught his name in the exchange, saw Ember gesture toward him with her wing. The 3 visitors turned their attention to David, and he fought the urge to run. The golden dragon spoke again, and this time, David heard human words mixed with the alien sounds. The creature was trying to communicate with him. "You kept, daughter of Empress?" David swallowed hard and nodded. "I saved her. She was dying. Kept secret, hid, royal heir. I did not know what she was at first, and later she wanted to stay." The 3 dragons conferred among themselves. Ember kept interrupting, her voice growing more desperate. David did not need a translation to understand. She was pleading for his life. Finally, the golden dragon turned back to him. "You would come. Empress must decide. Your fate. What about me?" Roger demanded. "I have rights too. This happened on a human colony." The blue dragon looked at Roger and breathed out a small puff of smoke. Roger stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. The message was clear. Roger did not matter. David looked at Ember, whose eyes were filled with tears. "Do I have a choice?" The golden dragon shook its head. "You come, or you die. Law is clear." Ember moved to David's side, pressing her head against his shoulder. She created a light pattern that said, "I am sorry." "I'm so sorry." David put his hand on her scales. "It is not your fault." He turned to the golden dragon. "If I come with you, will you let her be happy?" The dragon tilted its head, considering. "She is royal. She must return. To Perilous Major. Must learn. To rule. Then I will come. But I want her to promise me something." David looked at Ember. "Promise me you will do your duty. Promise me you will become the leader your people need. Promise me you will not waste your life being sad about me." Ember made a sound of pure anguish. She created patterns too fast for David to read, her whole body shaking with emotion. "I mean it," David said gently. "You have a whole empire that needs you. I am just one man. You will do great things, Ember. I know you will." The golden dragon nodded with what might have been respect. "You have honor. The spark bond is real." They gave David 1 hour to say goodbye. He spent it holding Ember close, memorizing every scale, every warm breath, every flicker of light across her body. They did not speak much. Everything important had already been said over 6 years of conversations. When the hour ended, the golden dragon returned. "Time to go." Ember created one final pattern, one that David had never seen before. It was beautiful, a spiral of silver and gold that seemed to hold all the love and grief in the world. David understood it instinctively. "Until fire reunites us." "Until fire reunites us," David repeated, though his voice broke on the words. He walked out of the cave without looking back. If he looked back, he would not be able to leave. Behind him, he heard Ember's cry of sorrow, a sound that would haunt him for years to come. The golden dragon led him to a ship that was hidden in the rocks. As they lifted off, David finally allowed himself one glance at the cave. Ember stood at the entrance, wings spread wide, her whole body blazing with light. She was beautiful. She was powerful. And she was no longer his. David closed his eyes and let the tears fall. Earth looked different after 6 years in space and 6 years on Ashford 7. The skies were too blue, the air too thick, the cities too crowded. David stood in his small apartment in New Seattle, looking out at the rain-soaked streets and felt like a stranger in his own hometown. The Dracorians had not killed him. After weeks of interrogation on Peerless Major, during which Ember herself had testified on his behalf, the Empress had made a judgment. David had saved the life of a royal heir, shown her honor and love, and asked nothing in return. For this he was pardoned. For this, he was given safe passage back to Earth. For this, he was forbidden from ever attempting to contact Ember again. The Empress had been clear. Ember had royal duties to fulfill. She needed to focus on her education, her political training, and her future role in the Empire. David was a distraction, a reminder of a time when she had been vulnerable and dependent. For Ember's own good, the connection had to be severed cleanly. David had agreed because he had no choice. He had watched Ember stand before her grandmother looking small despite her size, and he had seen the weight of expectation crushing down on her. She needed to be strong. She needed to be a leader. She did not need a human holding her back, so he had returned to Earth alone. The human colonial administration had been very interested in his story. They had debriefed him for months, squeezing every detail about Dracorian culture, technology, and politics from his memory. In return, they had offered him a job as a xenobiology consultant. The pay was good, the work was interesting, and it kept him busy enough that he did not have time to think too much about what he had lost. Or at least, that was what he told himself. His apartment was small but comfortable. He had decorated it with pictures and mementos from Ashford 7, the cave system where he had found Ember, the red desert at sunset, a sketch he had made of Ember when she was still small enough to fit on his desk. He knew it was unhealthy to dwell on the past, but he could not seem to let it go. 6 years had passed since the Dracorians took Ember away. In that time, humanity had made official contact with the Dracorian Empire. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were established. Humans visited Peerless Major, and Dracorians visited Earth. The two species were learning to coexist peacefully. David followed every news report about the Dracorians obsessively. He read academic papers about their biology, their history, their social structure. He learned their language, spending hours practicing the complex sounds and tones. His co-workers thought his dedication was admirable. They did not know it was closer to an obsession. He never saw any mention of Ember in the official reports. The royal family kept their private lives very private. David did not know if she was happy, if she was healthy, if she ever thought about him. The not knowing was worse than anything else. His personal life had remained frozen since his return. A few co-workers had asked him out on dates. A few friends had tried to set him up. David always declined politely. How could he explain that he had already given his heart to someone who lived light years away? How could he make them understand that he woke up some night still expecting to find Ember curled beside him, her scales warm against his skin? People called him dedicated to his work. They said he was married to his job. They had no idea how right they were, just not in the way they thought. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. David was in his office reviewing a trade proposal when his communicator buzzed. The message was marked urgent, encrypted with a code he did not recognize. He opened it carefully, expecting another consultation request. Instead, he found text written in Dracorian script. His heart stopped as he began to translate it word by word. Sparkfather, forgive my long silence. The flames of duty burned away my freedom to speak. But now I am sovereign, and my word is law. I am coming home. Ember, third Empress of the Peerless Throne. David read it 3 times, his hands shaking. Ember was Empress now. The old ruler must have died, and Ember had taken the throne, and she was coming to Earth. Before he could process this information, his office door burst open. His supervisor, Director Patricia Walsh, stood there looking panicked. Reeves, we have a situation. A big one. David followed her to the command center, where dozens of screens showed various views of Earth's orbital space. And there, approaching from the outer system, was a fleet that made David's blood run cold. There were hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. They filled the screens like a swarm of glittering insects, each one larger than any human vessel. At the center was a ship that dwarfed all the others, a massive structure that looked like a palace had been carved from ruby and gold. They showed up an hour ago, Patricia said, her voice tight. No warning, no advance contact. Just appeared at the edge of the system and started heading toward Earth. Every defense station in the solar system is on high alert. The military wants to engage before they get any closer. No, David said immediately. Tell them to stand down. Are you insane? That is an invasion fleet. It is a ceremonial honor guard, David corrected, his mind racing. The Dracorians do not send their empress anywhere without proper protection and display. This is not an attack. This is a state visit. How do you know? Because she told me she was coming. David showed her the message on his communicator. Patricia stared at it, then at him. You have been in contact with the Dracorian Empress? Not until today. But yes, apparently I have. The command center erupted into action. Calls were made to the Colonial Council, to military commanders, to diplomatic corps. Everyone wanted to know what the Dracorians wanted, why they were here, and why they had brought enough firepower to level a planet. David stood in the chaos, watching the screens. Somewhere on that massive flagship was Ember. After 6 years of silence, she was here. She was coming back to him, but why? What had changed? The answer came 6 hours later when the Dracorian fleet stopped at a position just outside Earth's defensive perimeter. They made no aggressive moves. They simply held position and sent a single message to Earth's government. The Third Empress of Paralis Major requests an audience with David Reeves, Guardian of the First Flame. All other matters will wait until this meeting is complete. The Colonial Council was not happy. They wanted to control the situation, manage the narrative, dictate the terms. But the Dracorians were clear. Either they sent David up to the flagship, or the Empress would come down to Earth. And if she came down, she would bring her entire honor guard with her. The sight of thousands of dragons landing on Earth might cause panic, so they agreed. David would go to her. The shuttle ride up to the flagship took 2 hours. David spent the time trying to calm his racing heart. He had dreamed about seeing Ember again countless times. But he had never imagined it would be like this. She was Empress now. She ruled an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. What could she possibly want with him? The flagship was even more impressive up close. Every surface gleamed with precious metals and gemstones. Dracorian guards lined the corridors, their scales shimmering in rainbow colors. They watched David pass with inscrutable eyes. Finally, he was led to a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. The doors opened and David stepped inside. Ember stood in the center of the room and David's breath caught. She had grown even larger, her body adorned with ceremonial armor and jewelry that caught the light like captured stars. She looked like something from a legend, powerful and ancient and magnificent. But her eyes were the same, that warm orange glow that he remembered from the day he found her in the cave. Those eyes that had watched him with love and trust and joy. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ember made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and rushed toward him. David barely had time to brace himself before she was there. Her massive head pressed against his chest, her whole body trembling. "Sparkfather," she said, and David realized she was speaking human words now, carefully pronounced. "I missed you. I missed you so much." David wrapped his arms around her neck as far as they would reach. "I missed you too, every single day." They stayed like that for a long time, neither willing to let go first. Finally, Ember pulled back and created a light pattern across her scales. It was the one that meant family. "I have so much to tell you," she said. "So much has happened. Grandmother died last year, and the council tried to block my ascension. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too influenced by human ideas. I had to fight for every inch of power." "But you won," David said, pride filling his voice. "I won. And the first thing I did as Empress was abolish the law that forbade me from contacting you." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. The council was not pleased. "But I am sovereign now. My word is final." "Why did you come here?" David asked. "Not that I am not happy to see you, but 1,000 ships seems like a lot for a social visit." Ember's expression grew serious. "I came because I need your help, and because Earth needs my help, even if your leaders do not know it yet." Ember led David through the corridors of her flagship to a private chamber that served as her office and living space. The walls were covered with star maps and reports written in Dracorian script. Some of the maps showed systems David recognized. Others showed vast regions of space he had never seen before. And on many of them, entire sections were marked in angry red. "Sit," Ember said, gesturing to a platform that had been designed for human visitors. "This will take time to explain." David sat watching as Ember settled herself across from him. Even relaxed, she radiated power and authority. This was not the young dragon he had raised in a cave. This was an empress who commanded the loyalty of billions. "Do you remember when I told you about the attack on my ship?" Ember asked. "The one that killed everyone except me?" "I remember. You said you never knew who the enemy was." "We did not know then, but we know now." Ember touched a control panel with her claw, and a holographic image appeared between them. It showed a creature that made David's skin crawl. It looked like a cross between an insect and a nightmare, all sharp angles and too many limbs. "This is a Vorlak soldier. They are a hive-minded species that exists only to consume and expand. They attacked my ship because we were in their expansion path. They did not care that I was royalty. They did not try to negotiate or communicate. They simply tried to kill us all." "How many of them are there?" David asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "Billions, maybe trillions. They reproduce rapidly and adapt quickly. Over the past 12 years, they have consumed 17 civilizations that we know of. Entire species wiped out, entire worlds stripped bare." Ember's eyes flickered with anger. "The Dracorian Empire has been fighting them for 6 years, ever since they entered our territory. We have held them back, but at great cost. We have lost 4 colony worlds and millions of our people." David felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "And they are heading toward human space. They will reach your outer colonies within 6 months," Ember confirmed. "Your military is not prepared for this. Your weapons are designed to fight other humans, not a species that thinks as one mind and feels no fear of death. Without help, humanity will fall. So you came to warn us. I came to offer an alliance." Ember changed the hologram, showing the positions of both Dracorian and human territories in relation to the Vorlak advance. "If we combine our forces, we have a chance. The Dracorians have the firepower and experience. Humans have adaptability and innovation. Together we might survive." David studied the map, his mind racing. "Your council must hate this idea. Allying with humans, sharing your military secrets, risking your ships to protect a species they barely know." "They do hate it," Ember admitted. "They fought me on this for months. But I am Empress, and I reminded them of something important. When I was dying in a cave, it was not a Dracorian who saved me. It was a human who saw a suffering creature and chose compassion over protocol. I told them that if one human could show such honor, then perhaps humanity as a species deserves the same consideration. You used our relationship to convince them. I used the truth." Ember's voice was firm. "You saved my life, Sparkfather. You raised me, taught me, loved me. Everything good I am, everything I have accomplished exists because you made a choice in a dark cave 12 years ago. I will not abandon your species in their time of need." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. There is more." Ember's expression grew even more serious. "For this alliance to work, both our species need to trust each other. Trust is built through relationships, through understanding, through seeing the best in each other. Our people need a symbol of that trust. They need to see a human and a Dracorian standing together as family. You want me to help with the diplomatic mission? I want more than that." Ember created a complex light pattern on her scales, one David had never seen before. In Dracorian culture, when an empress acknowledges a spark bond, she must formally present her spark parent to the Empire. It is one of the oldest traditions we have. I could not do this before because my grandmother forbade it. But now I am sovereign and I wish to honor you as you deserve. What does that mean exactly? It means I want to adopt you into the royal family officially. You would become guardian of the first flame, a title that has not been used in 3,000 years. You would be my father in the eyes of the law, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Ember paused. "You would also become humanity's official ambassador to the Dracorian Empire. A bridge between our species." David sat back, overwhelmed. "That is a lot of responsibility. You do not have to accept. I would never force this on you. But I believe you are the right person for this role. You understand both species. You have lived among humans and raised a Dracorian. You can help us understand each other." Ember moved closer, her voice softening. "And selfishly, I want my father back. I have missed you every day for 6 years. I do not want to lose you again." David looked at her, at this magnificent creature who still called him father after everything she had become. He thought about the small, broken hatchling he had found in a cave. He thought about the young dragon who had learned to read human books and dance to human music. He thought about 6 years of loneliness and longing. "Yes," he said quietly, "I accept." Ember's whole body blazed with light, bright enough that David had to shield his eyes. When the glow faded, she was pressing her head against his chest again, making a sound that was definitely a sob. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Sparkfather." They spent the next several hours talking, catching up on 6 years of separation. Ember told him about her political struggles, the allies she had made and the enemies she had defeated. She told him about the battles against the Vorlak, the losses they had suffered and the victories they had won. She told him about the loneliness of leadership, how she had wanted to contact him 1,000 times but could not until she had the power to change the laws. David told her about his life on Earth, his work with the colonial administration, his research into Dracorian culture. He told her about the nights when he would wake up expecting to find her beside him. He told her about the sketch he had drawn of her, the one he kept on his wall. "Can I see it?" Ember asked. "The sketch? It is in my apartment. But I can get it for you. I would like that. I have a gift for you too when we return to Perilous Major. I had something made, something I think you will like." Before David could ask what it was, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Ember's head snapped up, her body going rigid with tension. "That is the proximity warning," she said, moving quickly toward the command center. "Something just entered the system." David followed her, his heart pounding. The command center was chaos, with Dracorian officers shouting reports in their own language. Ember barked orders, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "What is happening?" David asked. "The Vorlak," Ember said grimly. "They are here. They found us." The main display showed multiple red dots appearing at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They were heading straight for Earth's outer colonies, just as Ember had predicted. But they had arrived 6 months early. How did they get here so fast? David demanded. "I do not know, but it does not matter now." Ember turned to her officers. "Send a message to Earth's defense forces. Tell them we are engaging the enemy. Tell them to evacuate the colony on New Haven immediately. That is where the Vorlak will strike first." David watched the display in horror. New Haven was a farming colony with a population of 50,000 people. Families, children, people who had no idea what was about to hit them. "We need to warn them," he said. "I just did. But evacuation takes time, and the Vorlak move fast." Ember looked at him, and David saw fear in her eyes for the first time since their reunion. "This is happening now, Sparkfather. Ready or not, the war has come to humanity." Orders flew through the command center as the Dracorian fleet prepared for battle. David stood beside Ember, watching the red dots grow closer on the display. He thought about all the people on New Haven who were about to face an enemy they did not understand. "I want to help," David said. "I want to fight beside you." Ember looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then stay close to me. I will need you to translate our tactics to Earth's forces. They need to understand how we fight if this is going to work." The first Vorlak ships reached New Haven 3 hours later. The battle for humanity's future had begun. David had never seen anything like the Vorlak ships. They were organic in appearance, covered in what looked like chitinous armor that shifted and moved as if alive. They did not fly so much as swarm, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually terrifyingly coordinated, and there were so many of them. "Ember, we need to get word to Earth's military command," David said, watching the tactical display with growing horror. "They need to know what they are facing." "Already done," Ember replied, her claws moving across control panels with practiced efficiency. "But they do not believe the threat is real. They think this is a territorial dispute between aliens that does not concern them. Then make them believe." Ember turned to David, and he saw the weight of command in her eyes. "How?" "By the time they understand the danger, New Haven will be gone. We need to act now." David took a deep breath and made a decision. "Connect me to the Colonial Council. I will make them listen." Ember nodded and opened a communication channel. Within seconds, David was looking at a holographic projection of the council chambers on Earth. 20 men and women stared at him with expressions ranging from confusion to annoyance. "Mr. Reeves," Counselor Warren spoke first. "This is highly irregular. We are in the middle of an emergency session, I know. I am watching the emergency from the bridge of a Dracorian warship." David kept his voice steady. "Those ships approaching New Haven are not a territorial dispute. They are an extinction-level threat called the Vorlak. They have destroyed 17 civilizations. They will destroy ours too if we do not act immediately." "How do you know this?" another counselor demanded. Because Empress Ember came here to warn us, because she brought a fleet to help defend us, and because if you do not authorize Earth's defense forces to join the Dracorian ships right now, 50,000 people on New Haven are going to die in the next 2 hours. The council erupted into arguments. Some believed him. Others thought it was a trick. A few insisted on waiting for more evidence. David felt precious seconds slipping away while they debated. Then Ember stepped into view of the holographic camera, her massive form dominating the display. The council chamber went silent. "I am Ember, 3rd Empress of Perilous Major," she said, her human words careful but clear. "I speak truth. The Vorlak show no mercy. They take no prisoners. They do not negotiate. If you wait for proof, you will find it in the bodies of your dead. David Reeves is guardian of the first flame, my spark father, and humanity's ambassador to my empire. When he speaks with my authority. Listen to him or watch your species die." The raw power in her voice cut through the political posturing. Counselor Warren leaned forward, his face pale. "What do you need from us?" "Everything," David said. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. And you need to trust us to coordinate the defense because we have fought this enemy before." The vote was close, but it passed. Earth's defense forces were authorized to join the Dracorian fleet under combined command. It was not a perfect solution, but it was enough to start. The battle for New Haven began as the first Vorlak ships entered weapons range. The Dracorian fleet moved to intercept, their formations tight and disciplined. Earth's ships followed, and David could see their hesitation. They had never fought alongside aliens before. They did not know the Dracorian tactics or signals. That was where David came in. Ember had given him a communication channel that connected to both fleets. He became the translator, the bridge, explaining Dracorian battle language to human commanders and human concerns to Dracorian officers. "Dracorian Wing 3 is moving to flank position," David called out as he watched the tactical display. Human ships Delta and Echo moved to support their left side. "When they breathe fire, you need to be ready to exploit the gaps in the enemy formation." It was chaos. Human pilots were not used to fighting near creatures who could breathe superheated plasma. Dracorian officers struggled to understand why human ships needed to maintain certain distances from each other. Mistakes were made. 2 human frigates nearly collided with a Dracorian cruiser. A wing of fighters accidentally flew through a plasma breath attack meant for the enemy. But slowly, painfully, they learned to work together. Human ships began to anticipate Dracorian movements. Dracorian warriors started to appreciate human tactics, the way they could adapt and improvise on the fly. What started as a disorganized mess gradually became something resembling coordination. The Vorlak fought with relentless efficiency. They did not care about losses. When one ship was destroyed, 3 more took its place. They focused their attacks on weak points, targeting ships that were damaged or isolated. They learned from each engagement, adapting their tactics in real time. Ember led from the front, her flagship diving into the thickest fighting. She breathed fire that melted through Vorlak armor, her claws tearing apart enemy hulls. Other Dracorians followed her example, and David watched in awe as they fought with a ferocity that seemed impossible. But the Vorlak kept coming. For every 10 they destroyed, 20 more appeared. The evacuation of New Haven was still underway, and they needed to buy more time. "We are losing ground," David said, watching the tactical display with growing dread. "There are too many of them." "Then we adapt," Ember replied. She opened a channel to all ships, human and Dracorian alike. "This is Empress Ember. Human commanders, I have studied your history. You have a saying, improvise, adapt, overcome. Show me what that means." What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for generations. Human commanders, freed from rigid doctrine by Ember's challenge, began to experiment. They used debris fields as weapons, ramming damaged ships into Vorlak formations. They coordinated their attacks with Dracorian fire breaths, timing their missiles to hit seconds after the plasma cleared. They even jury-rigged one of their damaged frigates to emit a signal that confused the Vorlak hive mind, causing an entire wing to fly into an asteroid field. The Dracorians, seeing human creativity in action, began to adopt some of the tactics. They used their superior speed to herd Vorlak ships into kill zones that human artillery had prepared. They shared shield frequencies so human ships could take shelter behind Dracorian cruisers during recharge cycles. It was messy and desperate and beautiful, 2 species who barely knew each other, fighting as one to protect lives they had never met. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it finally ended, the Vorlak fleet had been destroyed or driven off. New Haven's evacuation was complete. Not a single human life had been lost to the initial attack, though several ships on both sides had been destroyed in the fighting. The cost had been high, but they had won. Together. David collapsed into a chair on Ember's bridge, exhausted beyond anything he had ever felt. Ember landed beside him, her scales scorched and one wing damaged, but her eyes bright with triumph. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "This was just the first battle," David warned. "There will be more." "I know, but now Earth knows the threat is real. Now your people understand what we are fighting for." Ember created a light pattern that meant hope, and they saw that we can win if we stand together. Over the next few days, everything changed. The Colonial Council formally accepted Ember's alliance proposal. David was officially named humanity's ambassador to the Dracorian Empire and given authority to coordinate joint military operations. Plans were drawn up for a permanent combined headquarters, a space station that would serve as the center of human Dracorian cooperation. They called it Spark Haven. Construction began immediately, with both species contributing resources and technology. The station would orbit neutral space between Earth and Pyralus Major, a symbol of their alliance and a practical base for coordinating the war against the Vorlak. David moved his belongings to the station as soon as the first habitation modules were complete. It felt right living between worlds belonging to both and neither. Ember visited regularly when her duties allowed, and their relationship deepened into something even stronger than it had been before. Other bonds formed too. Human engineers worked alongside Dracorian craftsmen, learning from each other. Human soldiers trained with Dracorian warriors, sharing techniques and strategies. Scientists from both species collaborated on weapons development and defensive technologies. Slowly, carefully, two civilizations that had barely known each other began to understand that they were stronger together. The war against the Vorlak continued. There were losses and setbacks. There were disagreements and cultural misunderstandings. But there were also victories. Moments of perfect coordination when human ingenuity combined with Dracorian power to achieve the impossible. David stood on the observation deck of Spark Haven 6 months after the Battle of New Haven, watching ships from both species pass peacefully through the space lanes. Human freighters carried Dracorian manufactured goods. Dracorian transports delivered human agricultural products. Military vessels of both types patrolled together, protecting the trade routes from Vorlak raids. He heard the familiar sound of Ember's arrival before he saw her. She landed on the observation deck with the grace of long practice, her scales gleaming in the starlight. "You are thinking deep thoughts," she said, settling beside him. "Just remembering," David replied. "Thinking about a cave on a dead planet, a small dying creature that I almost left behind. I am glad you did not leave me," Ember said softly. "So am I." David put his hand on her scales, feeling the warmth beneath. "Do you ever wonder how different things would be if I'd followed protocol that day? If I had reported you instead of rescuing you? I would be dead," Ember said simply. "And when the Vorlak came, humanity would have faced them alone. Your species might have fallen. Mine would have continued fighting, but without the human creativity that has won us so many battles." She created a new light pattern, one she had been working on for weeks. It was complex and beautiful, incorporating elements of both Dracorian and human language. "Everything good that has happened, everything we have built exists because you made a choice. Because you saw a suffering creature and chose compassion over fear." David watched the light pattern flow across her scales. "What does that mean?" he asked, pointing to a particular sequence. "Sparkfather, you saved more than one life that day. You saved 2 worlds." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and the ships and the future they had built together. David thought about destiny and choice, about how one moment in a dark cave had reshaped the galaxy. He thought about loneliness and connection, about finding family in the most unexpected places. "Thank you," Ember said quietly, "for everything. For saving me, for raising me, for letting me go, and for coming back." "Thank you," David replied, "for being my daughter, for showing me that family is not about species or biology. It is about love and choice and standing together when it matters most." Ember created the pattern that meant family, the one that had started their journey 12 years ago in a cave on Ashford 7. David traced it with his finger, memorizing every curve and spiral, Outside the observation deck, a new era was beginning. Humans and Dracorians were learning to trust each other, to fight together, to build a future that neither could achieve alone. And at the heart of it all was a bond between a man and a dragon, between a Sparkfather and his chosen daughter. The Vorlak were still out there, still dangerous. There would be more battles, more losses, more challenges to overcome. But now humanity had allies. Now they had hope. And it had all started with one simple act of kindness in a dark cave, when a lonely man decided that a dying creature was worth saving. David smiled, looking at Ember, looking at the ships, looking at the future they had made possible. "We did good, didn't we?" he said. Ember's eyes glowed bright with joy. "We did, Sparkfather. We did." And in the space between worlds, surrounded by the evidence of what compassion could build, they stood together and watched the stars shine.